Today we are talking about absolute value as a grouping, and let's review very quickly, what does absolute value mean? We went over absolute value in our integers unit, so what does absolute value mean to the problem? So absolute value is the distance from 0, and absolute value is always positive. All right, so let's review what is absolute value. So absolute value, distance from 0. So how many spaces away is a number from 0? So how many spaces away is -9 from 0? Well, it's 9 spaces away. Absolute value is always positive. It's 9 spaces away from 0. How about you try 2 and 3? How many spaces is 17 away from 0? That would be 17. The absolute value of -16. How far is -16 away from 0? 16 spaces. Now number 4 was one that kind of tripped you up whenever we were in our integers unit, which is why we added it here. 1/5, absolute value is always positive, so it's just 1/5 spaces away from 0. So how can we use absolute value as a grouping symbol when we're solving order of operations problems? So we can use absolute value as a grouping symbol. So the first thing that we do is we need to solve the numbers inside the absolute value first. Then we can find absolute value, and then we continue on with the order of operations. And we did a little bit of this when we were in our integers unit, but now we're going to focus on it a little bit more. So let's look at some examples. So if we look at the first one, it says solve the numbers inside the absolute value first. So we're going to do this step first. And because there's only one number in there, we're going to find the absolute value. Absolute value turns numbers positive. So the absolute value of -22 would be positive 22 plus 9. And then 22 plus 9 would be 31. And it's done. It's as simple as that. If we look at number 6, the absolute value of 10 would be 10 minus the absolute value of -4. Next step, absolute value of -4 is 4. And I have 10 minus 4, which is 6. You try number 7. So you can actually solve both absolute values at one time if you want to, because they don't affect each other. So you could do the absolute value of 7 is 7 times 9 times the absolute value of 0 is 0. 7 times 9 would be 63 times 0 would be 0 as your answer. Now these bottom ones is where it's going to get a little bit tricky, and we're going to have to follow that order of operations. So if I look at number 8, absolute value is considered a grouping symbol. So I'm going to solve this guy first. The absolute value of 100 is 100 divided by the absolute value of 5 to the second power. I still have a grouping, so I need to solve this grouping symbol next. But before I can solve that grouping, I have an exponent here, 5 to the second power. So really that's 100 divided by the absolute value, 5 to the second power, is written out 5 times 5, which is 25. Still in absolute value bars. We haven't solved that yet. Then we have to take the absolute value of 25, always positive, so it's 25. And then 100 divided by 25 is 4. Now number 9 also is a little tricky. We have to solve those groupings first. So we're going to look inside our first grouping, which is going to be here. But what do you solve first inside the grouping? Are you going to do the subtraction, or are you going to do the exponent? Well, in this case, we actually have to do the exponent first. 3 to the third power, and I can write that out as 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 would be 9. 9 times 3 would be 27. So this is the absolute value of 27 minus 7, close absolute value, plus the absolute value of 4 plus 6. close absolute value. Then we have then we need to finish this grouping. Do the subtraction. 27 minus 7 would be 20, absolute value. And we can solve the next step, which would be finish that absolute value out, so that would be 20 plus the absolute value of 4 plus 6. Four plus 6 would be 10 in absolute value, plus 20. And I'm going to bring this over here a little bit. Absolute value of 10 would be 10. Now, if you wanted to, you could kind of skip some of these steps and work it at the same time, because these are two separate groupings here. So you could have done this grouping and this grouping at the same time and then brought them down to the bottom. So that would be an option too if you don't want to do all those steps, because there's an addition sign between them. So that one was a little bit tricky. And then number 10, why don't you try number 10 by yourself? See if you can figure it out. So we're going to do the grouping, but inside the grouping we have to do the exponent first. So we have negative absolute value 17 minus 2 times 2 is 4. Close absolute value. 17, oops, made a mistake. I wrote 2, should be 4. Then I'm going to solve this, 17 minus 4. So I have negative absolute value, 17 minus 4 is 13, close absolute value. Absolute value of 13 is 13, and then it gets attacked at the end with a negative sign. Okay, let's look at the bottom two. Groupings, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. I have a grouping of this absolute value right here. 2 plus 16 is 18 in absolute value times 8 plus 1 to the first, or 1 to the second, I'm sorry. Absolute value of 18 is 18. Done with the grouping. Exponent, 1 to the second power is 1 plus 18 times 8. Done with exponents. Multiplication, 18 times 8 is 144 plus 1. Finish the addition at the end. Answer. Let's look at number 12. Groupings, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. Groupings, the first thing I have right here is a grouping. And remember, negative negative makes a positive. So it's really 18 plus 3. So 18 plus 3 would be absolute value of 21 divided by 7 times negative 4 plus 1 to the second power. I want you to try to take it from here, see if you can get the answer at the end. So you find the absolute value of 21 divided by 7 times negative 4 plus 1 to the second. Divide that. You got 3. Multiply. Oops, I'm sorry, not multiply. Exponent, which would be 1. Negative 12 multiplying, and then you get an answer of negative 11. Signs are different, find the difference. Okay, I want you to flip over. I want you to try 13 and 14 on your own. When you're ready, pause the video, or unpause the video and check your work. And here are your answers for 13 and 14. Careful what you're doing inside of your grouping first, especially for number 13. Careful you do that multiplication first and not the subtraction. Let's pause and let's do 15 and 16 on your own. There are your answers for 15 and 16. Be careful that double negative right there turns into a big plus. So make sure you're careful with that step in number 15. Let's look at the last two, 17 and 18. Pause the video, do them on your own. When you're ready, unpause to check your work. And here's your answers for number 17 and 18. Now, one thing I want to make sure I stress is make sure you make your absolute value bars taller than your ones, and you make them straight. If you want to make them dark, like I'm making them dark here so you can see them, that's great. Make sure you make them straight and not curved like your parentheses. Absolute values bars are straight up and down, parentheses are curved. So make sure that you're careful when you are doing and writing your work. You need to make sure you're writing neatly for this unit so you can find everything. If you have any questions, please make sure you check in and see your teacher and let us know before you do your Socrative.